Good morning and welcome to Good Morning UK. Have your say. Our mid morning and mid-week show here from the Nerve Centre at A Force for Good. Coming to you live as always with me, Alistair McConaughey. And please do send us your messages and your thoughts and your comments this morning. This is our talk show, as it were. This is for you to get something off your mind or to raise an issue that's been bothering you this week, for example. So please do send in your comments and let's hear from you. And good to see people watching. We've got a big show coming up today. We're going to be talking about Nicola's Pretendy referendum. Good morning to Alan, who's watching there on Facebook. Nice to see you again, Alan. We're going to be talking about the good things that may have come out of the COVID lockdown. And we've also got a competition coming up at the top of the hour. So please do send us, fire in your stuff, fire in your ideas, and we'll get started here. Who's calling and where are you calling from? Ian calling from Aberdeenshire. Nice to hear from you, Ian. And Rob, good morning to you, Rob. And Anne, morning to you. And Raymond. Good stuff. Now, the news this weekend you'll have seen. Nicola Sturgeon is saying that she's going to go ahead with a referendum. We're going to talk just what that would involve, whether it's a good idea, and what indeed we should do about that. Now, Joan says, are shops opening Saturday? We're going to talk about that when we get onto the COVID element of the programme, because there are some shops that are saying they're going to just to open on Saturday, the 30th. As an act of resistance, essentially, to the COVID lockdown. Good morning to you, Ben, and hi to Hank. Ray, glad to see you in here as always, and Graham. Alan says, what do we think of George Galloway and his approach? Now, just a wee point, if you're watching on Facebook, and if Facebook says, let StreamYard see your comments, please do click the yes, let StreamYard see your comments. That's if you're watching on Facebook, because unless you do that, we might not actually see your comments. So if you click on that, it allows us to see your comments. And please do send them in, folks. Please do send them in. And James says, good morning to you all. And Joan says that she will be shopping to support the small businesses who are brave enough to stay open. And good to see Debbie, as always, in the programme. Ibrox Park, a long time listener, says, good morning from County Down. Now, folks, let's begin with the strange interview that Nicola Sturgeon had on the Andrew Marr show. Now, what she was saying is that if she were to get a majority of seats in the Scottish Parliament, if she and the other separatist supporting parties were to do that, then she would take that as a mandate for campaigning for a second referendum. Now, there's a possibility that she may not get that. But we need to always be thinking about the danger of that and moving and deciding what should we do. Now, when we listen to her words very carefully, she's actually been very clever about this. She's not saying that she's going simply to hold a referendum. She's going to go through all the legal malarkey to do that. And what that would require would be her taking it, testing it in court, essentially, and taking it all the way up to the Supreme Court. So she's not just going to call a referendum the day after she wins a majority of seats. She's going to say, I'm taking this as a mandate to aim for a legal referendum, and she's going to work towards that. And she knows that in order to get a legal referendum, she has to get the permission, quite rightly, of the British Parliament for her to do so. But she's going to argue that she doesn't need that. She's going to argue that the people of Scotland have spoken, and that is a sufficient mandate. And she's going to take that argument to the court, the High Court in Scotland, and then she's going to take it, or somebody's going to take it right up to the top, to the so-called Supreme Court in London. And that's going to be quite a long process of several months. And during this time, she can't really lose, because she's always going to be campaigning for a referendum. She's always going to be putting that centre forward. The media are going to be obsessing about it all the time. And even if it gets up to the Supreme Court and she loses, then she's spent the last 8-9 months or a year or whatever campaigning for a referendum, and the British government and unionism in general will have been put on the back foot, appearing in her mind and in the eyes of her supporters to be denying some kind of legitimate democratic decision by the people. Well, there's an awful lot wrong with that. And we'll get to that in a minute. Rob says, good morning, fellow Britons everywhere. Good morning to you, Rob, and Jim. Good to see you here from Dunfermline. And well, Alan says that if she doesn't get a majority, she should take Indy 2 off the political agenda and resign. Do people think that she's going to resign? That's the thing. Do people think that she's going to resign as a consequence of the carry on with Alex Salmond? What's your thoughts on that? Indeed. There's a question for us, eh? Will Sturgeon resign? Let's hear what you think about that. So, going back to this so-called referendum, she's going to say that we cannot deny the moral and democratic legitimacy of her winning a majority of seats. Well, we can, and we can do it morally, and we can deny it democratically, and especially we can deny it constitutionally. Because here's the bottom line: the Constitution is a matter for the British Parliament. The Union itself is held together at the level of the Union Parliament, which is the British Parliament, which happens to be based in Westminster. That's where we have our mandate for unity. You see, we have a mandate for unity as Unionists, and that mandate is held by every single MP who goes to Westminster and who sits in it and who says this is a legitimate parliament. And it doesn't matter what party that they're from. They can be from the Conservatives, from Labour, from the Lib Dems, or even from the SNP. If they go and they sit in Westminster as a result of having been elected by people in Scotland, then they are giving 100% legitimacy not only to that parliament, but to the union for which it stands. So every MP at Westminster has and is representing the mandate for unity that's keeping the United Kingdom together. And if the SNP don't like that, they should not be sitting in Westminster. So we do have a mandate for unity, and it's represented by all the Scottish MPs who sit in the Union Parliament, every single one of them. Okay, so it's at the level of the British Parliament that the Union is found. It's at the level of the British Parliament that, at the level of the Union Parliament, that's what is in fact holding the Union together. So it's at that level, it's at the British parliamentary level that any of these questions have to be discussed and worked out and decided. It's not at the level of Holyrood. Holyrood is a devolved arm of the British Parliament. It is in a hierarchical structure with the British Parliament at the top and with the devolved arms coming out of it below. Holyrood is not an equal and opposite parliament to Westminster. That is indeed how the SNP try to misrepresent the situation, but it's not. It's a devolved arm that owes its life to the Union Parliament body. And so it's constitutionally, there is no question that the matter of the Union is decided at the Union Parliament, not at the devolved parliaments. So what does that mean in reality? In reality, that means that if you want a mandate for a referendum on breaking up the UK, you have to find that mandate at the level of the Union Parliament. That is, at the time of a general election. And you would need to go into that general election saying that if the majority of people in Scotland, and it has to be a majority of the people, elect a majority of the MPs who are standing for a referendum, then we can talk about the possibility of having a second referendum. But we cannot talk about it just because they happen to have been elected at a devolved level. So that's the constitutional reality, and we laid that out in our latest magazine, Union Heart. But you can also find it on our website, where we wrote an article, Holyrood cannot deliver an indie ref mandate, and we went through the various reasons why that it cannot. And so we've just explained a constitutional reason, but there's also various democratic reasons. One of the democratic reasons is, of course, that we've just had a referendum. We had a referendum 6 years ago, and we won it. So please do respect our democratic vote there, please. Don't try to imagine that you can simply just hold another referendum because you got the wrong result last time. You know, that's not the way that democracy works. Okay, Davey, Shannon, I see the point that you're making there. I'm not aware if I can actually do anything at this end regarding the chat on YouTube, but bear with me. Callum here saying that she cannot see it as a mandate because the votes are going to be split 4 or 5 ways and people will not just be voting on that issue. That's true. It's now up to hear the voices of the rest of the UK if it wants to see its union divided. Well, you see, that's a point. That's where also the democratic issue comes in as well, which is that Scotland is not the only person here in the ring, as it were. Breaking up the United Kingdom is not just a matter for Scotland. This is a matter for everybody who believes in the United Kingdom. People in England, Northern Ireland and Wales also. They all have to be involved in some way. It's not just a matter for a small electorate of around 4 million people to decide the future of the entire United Kingdom. Okay? Democratically, we as unionists see the demos, see the demographic as the entire United Kingdom electorate, and it's for the entire United Kingdom electorate to be involved if it's about this country breaking up, which is to say the United Kingdom. And you see, that's another thing that the SNP won't accept. They won't accept that the United Kingdom is a country. They don't want to accept that because they know if they accepted it, everything that we're saying is true. Now, Aaron says, hi, just found your channel. Fantastic. Good. Aaron, please do check in. We're broadcasting every Wednesday at 10:30 to 11:30 and the video is up. And James thinks that she's odds on to go. Well, you might be right, James. And here's another thing. You know, a lot of people they get tired of Sturgeon and so on. But the point of the matter is that if she went, you should see who's waiting in the wings. Oh my goodness me! You should see who's waiting in the wings. I mean, if you think Sturgeon is bad, there's some real fruitcakes, aggressive, angry, bitter fruitcakes waiting in the wings to take over the SNP, believe me. And these are people, and I'm not going to name them, but no doubt you can guess who they are, who never meet people like us, right? They never meet unionists. They never meet people who believe in the United Kingdom. They live entirely in a world where everybody is agreeing with them. And so they actually do go through life thinking that 100% of Scotland wants separation. They don't realise that at least half the country doesn't. And that arrogance and hubris pushes them into behaviours which are frankly dangerous, you know. And they're all waiting in the wings ready to take over if Sturgeon departs. I'll say this for Sturgeon, at least she's got a little bit of diplomatic sense, whereas these people who are coming up do not. So be careful what we wish for. That's all I can say about that. And Samuel reflects what a lot of us thinking. I don't think she will resign at all. This subject is very much something close to my heart. I'm glad to hear that, Samuel. To my mind, the UK should stay united together. Absolutely. Absolutely. We have to. The world, literally, the world depends upon it, because the United Kingdom, that's why we call ourselves a force for good. The United Kingdom is a force for good, and it can only be a force for good in the world if we stay united. Alan, we are better as one nation. How would we survive as an independent country? She needs to clean up Govan Hill. I don't see her cleaning up Govan Hill, but she does need to. You're absolutely right. Mags, good morning from North Ayrshire. We have to remove the SNP from Edinburgh, from Holyrood. Yes, that's for certain. And George, why has Westminster not called for an audit to see where the money has gone? I don't know. Robert, good morning. Spot on, SNP is incompetent beyond belief. And Ray says Sturgeon has some diplomatic sense but no credibility. She needs to go. So here's a wee thought, right? Just imagine that she took this all the way up to the Supreme Court, and if she won at the Supreme Court, which is kind of unlikely, but if she won, then what that would mean is that the British Constitution would just be a joke, essentially, because it would be saying that a devolved arm of the British Union Parliament has the power to break up the United Kingdom, which would be absolutely crazy. So I can't see her winning that. But, you know, in this crazy world with all the immediate and quick changes that seem to be coming in, you should not discount the possibility that she might win it, you know, because, and so many of our judges and politicians don't understand the British Constitution in the way that they ought to understand it. So all sorts of crazy decisions could come out. So we shouldn't discount the idea that she might actually win it when she takes it to the Supreme Court. However, it's probably unlikely that she would. I mean, she shouldn't. And morally and legally, she should not win it. win such a nonsense. But imagine, chances are she'll lose it. So what is she then going to do if she loses the case at the Supreme Court? Is she just going to hold it anyway? And if she held it anyway, what should we do? What should we do? Should we vote in a Pretendy referendum? Should we vote in a referendum that the Supreme Court had declared was illegal, but which, and it might not be Nicola Sturgeon by that time, it might be one of these nutters that I've been talking to you about, who's running the SNP. Well, let's name them: Joanne Cherry, Angus Robertson, people like them. It could be some of them who are running the show. And would we vote in their Pretendy referendum? Should we vote in it? Interested to hear your thoughts on that. John says, without democracy there's anarchy. Keep up the good fight. Pauline says, Sturgeon must go and the SNP must go. It's the only hope we have. Well, we've been getting one or two good comments from MPs and MSPs these days. You know, I know we don't support any particular party, but I know Douglas Ross is doing his level best. There's a fellow who's kind of come into our attention recently, a guy called Andrew Bowie, who's an MP. He's talking a lot of sense. He's doing very well. And I'll just talk about him in a moment. But before I do that, I just want to give a quick mention here to this day in British history. And today is the 27th of January. And it is the day in 1690 when Captain James Strong landed on a certain group of islands in the South Atlantic, and he named the strait between them the Falkland Strait. The Falkland Strait, named by Captain John Strong. And that was the name that caught on to describe the Falklands. And he named that after the Royal Navy treasurer, Viscount Falkland, who was named after Falkland Palace in Fife. Falkland means folk land. Land held by folk right. And so that was in 27th of January 1690. The Falklands were named by Captain John Strong. Today in British history. And here's the Argentinian football team. The Falklands are British. Lovely banner held there by the Argentinian football team. I should say that's a Photoshop, just in case you're wondering if what's happening with them. Indeed. Now, Jim's got a big comment here. Scotland's miles worse. Got a bridge that the cars can't cross over but looks nice. The hospital that's not open, where the air conditioning's broken, ferries covered in rust, millions of pounds scattered like dust. Who's telling the truth about who knew and when the minutes were taken? Indeed. A lot of stuff there. A lot of stuff. David says, any pretend referendum will have pretend votes. It will be a total farce we should totally shun. Yeah. I'm with you there. I don't see how we can possibly go along with that, really. Kaylin is saying 4 days until the 31st of January. What's the significance with that, Kaylin? And Linda says, hello. Good to see you, Linda. Good to see you. Charlie's with us here. Should not vote in an illegal referendum. Yeah. Well, I did mention that we had a competition coming up. Well, the competition is for, and let me just sort this out. The competition is for this little can of Walker's Union Jack Shortbread, which is a lovely little can, and here it's got the saltire and the Ulster flag, and here it's got St George and the Dragon of Wales. And the shortbread is actually stamped like a Union Jack, so that's going out to you free, to the person who can answer the following question. Now, I'm afraid you're going to have to send in it as an email, and it will be the first person who emails the correct answer. And the email that you need to send to is contact@aforceforgood.uk. Okay? The email for the answer is contact@aforceforgood.uk. And the question is, who named the Falkland Islands on this day, 27th of January 1690? Who was it that named the Falkland Islands? And I'll tell you the winner at the bottom of the hour, just before we go, and we'll send this to you free of charge. Who named the Falkland Islands on this day, on the 27th of January 1690? Don't send in your comment. Don't send it in as a comment. You have to send it in to that address, to that email. Okay, the first person on that email with the answer. Good stuff, folks. Good stuff. You know, we don't want it. We don't want it. It has to be an email, Ben. Has to be an email. Okay. Kaylin says that's mint. That's shortbread. That's what that is. Actually, talking about mint, I knew the girl whose father invented After Eights, and let me tell you, she was absolutely minted. Okay, where were we? Yeah, we're at the Pretendy referendum. Well, we're not going to accept that, and we're going to make a constitutional, a moral, and a democratic Okay, we're back. We lost a little bit of. We lost a little bit there. Um, so tell us how you are, folks. Tell us how you are. I mentioned earlier the a chap called Andrew Bowie, who's an MP, and he wrote a very good article which we published on our Facebook page, which we linked to on our Facebook page yesterday. And he was speaking about just basic ways to defend the Union. And he pointed out that the British government never talks about the British government, okay? It never talks even about Britain. It talks about the UK government and it talks about our foreign nations. And I can understand why it's choosing that sort of rhetoric. But at the end of the day, this is also about identity, okay? And there's such a thing as a British identity. There's not such a thing as really as a UK as such identity. So you need to talk more about Britain, and we need to talk more about the British, and we need to talk about the British government, and we need to talk about Britain, the nation. And I was talking to somebody this morning, and they were saying how they found it a little bit disconcerting that whenever Matt Hancock stood up, he might talk about the figures for all of Britain, but he'll only, behind him is like a map of England or something like that, when in fact there doesn't seem to be any proper thought given to getting your rhetoric and your words and your descriptions correct and ensuring that these are all linked up properly in the mind of the nation. So Andrew Bowie was saying that we basically have to start talking about our identity. He goes, quote, "We are asking people to identify with something we do not speak of, i.e. Britain and the British. Indeed, the only national institutions I can think of that retain the term British are the BBC and the British Army. And anyone under the age of 30 doesn't remember British Rail." And see, that's a good point. We used to have all these nationalised industries. Now, whatever you may think about nationalised industries versus privatisation, etc., etc., the point is they were all framed as British. British Leyland, British Rail, British Steel. All these sorts of things which just made people always understand the reality of the wider picture that they were living within. And all of that tended to just went to the wind, basically. So at least we need to talk about that, because as he says here, language is important. The sense of belonging and ownership is important. The idea of a shared identity is important. So true, so true. And this is why we are so opposed to those people who say that we need a federal system. Because at the end of the day, okay, we're going to keep the Union together by doing more things together, not more things apart. We're going to keep it together by doing more things in cooperation and solidarity than doing more things differently and separately. Okay, you bond by working together. You do not bond by working apart. And every business and office knows that. And it's exactly the same for a nation as well. And so when we go into the next few years, okay, we're going to be facing three options. One of the options, which we're going to be hearing all the time from the media and the commentators and ex-politicians, and especially the London metropolitan bubble, will be, oh, we need more powers to Scotland, we need more federalism. No, all that's doing is it's encouraging people to do more things apart than together. The other option will be, oh, let's just give in and give Nicola Sturgeon a referendum, or Joanna Cherry, or whoever is in power by that time. And again, constitutionally, morally and democratically, that would be wrong from a unionist point of view. And the third option, which is the option that we advocate, is simply to promote the union and to promote unity and to promote social, cultural, and political solidarity, not separatism, to make the positive case for the union, to speak about all the good things that come from being British. You see, a lot of people these days, because Britain and British are the words that dare not speak their name, a lot of younger people, quite understandably, do not have the associations, the positive associations with these terms that many of us have. So, and that's understandable because these words and these ideas have been suppressed. So it's simply a matter of promoting them again, which is what we have set our life's task here at A Force for Good to do. And we know that as long as we keep promoting the good things about being British, the good things about the United Kingdom, standing up against political ideas which separate us, standing up against political ideas which encourage us to do more apart than together, and promote political ideas that encourage unity and solidarity and cooperation, then ultimately we will prevail. But it's a long-term effort. There's no short-term fix. You know, these people, these commentators who seem to think that all you need to do is to give the SNP more power and then they'll go away. They don't understand the nature of the SNP, right? The SNP and the separatists in general don't want more powers because they've got some sort of liberal idea about where democracy is best exercised. No, that doesn't come into it. At the heart of what drives them is simply irritation, anger, and sometimes a strange warped sense of historical bitterness against the old enemy, as they used to call them. You know, there is that's what's driving them. Okay, it's a sort of anti-England and anti-Englishness which is at the root of it. It's not some sort of, you know, liberal idea about where powers are best exercised. No. That's to totally misunderstand the nature of separatism. And you can misunderstand it if you simply live in a political bubble and you think everything looks good on paper. Oh yeah, if we just exercise these powers at that level, then everything's going to be hunky dory. Yeah, on paper. But in reality, that's not the way that it works. You see, that's the difference between people who understand political reality and people who are simply political theorizers. So, a steadfast, loyal, and true advocacy for the union and for unity and for our social, cultural, and political solidarity and cooperation. That's the way to go. Not federalism, not more powers, and certainly not bending to the nationalists and separatist demands for another referendum. Because believe me, there is a strong moral, constitutional, and democratic case to be made against a second referendum, and we give you our word that we will do our best to continue to make that case. And I'm glad to see one or two people now having the courage, one or two MPs and MSPs having the courage to push back against that, because at the end of the day, all we need here is simply the courage to do so and the words to do so. And here we go. Mag says, hatred and bitterness drive these people. Witnessed it so many times. Samuel says there's something that's a little bit sad. I find that being young myself at 26, it can be hard to show my patriotic side. Well, just go ahead. Go ahead, because you've got every reason to be proud, Samuel. Samuel Brunel. That's a Auspicious name, Brunel. TC says, morning. Good morning to you, TC. Well, Andrew says you have a good point, but when you try to put the facts and figures over to an SNP supporter, they either can't accept it or they get aggressive. Well, I suppose that is so with some of them. Now, I'm just going to find out who has won the competition. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 correct answers. Well, sorry, no, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 correct answers, but the winner is, and let me put up the name. We have a winner. We have a winner of the Miles Clegg. If you can please send us, Miles, by email to that same address, your mailing address, and we'll get that sent off to you this afternoon. Okay? Thanks very much. Thanks very much, folks, for participating in that competition. We're probably going to have a competition every week now, actually, because it's quite a good thing. We've got 1 or 2 more of those to shift, and we've got other smaller prizes as well. So thanks very much. Thanks very much for taking part in that competition. So please do send us your address, Miles. Thank you. Mary Gregor says, well done, Miles. Callum says, many Conservatives voted SNP in order to keep the lefties out of Westminster. Yeah, I've heard that, with no independence on their mind. That's true. The thing is, when you vote SNP, you get SNP, and they come with their own drawbacks. But that's true, Callum. I've heard that. I've heard that. Gordon says that wee Bernie will hold on by her fingernails for as long as the cult believes she is the answer to their prayers. The minute she takes the foot off their aspirations, they'll be runners-up. Interesting thought. Interesting thought. Yeah, so going back now to another thing that we wanted to get in, which we wanted to mention. We always talk about the COVID lockdown, but have any good things come out of the lockdown? Now, while we're on this question, does anybody know any places which are taking part in the mass civil disobedience opening of shops and bars and so on, which is meant to be happening this Saturday, the 30th? Here in the office, we don't know of any, but we'd be interested to know if there are any. I know there's an internet campaign to get things opening up on the 30th. Does anybody know of any that are doing it? You don't need to mention their names, but just tell us if you know of any. But other than that, what are the good things that have come out of the lockdown? Because, you know, we don't want to be too. This is about positive stuff, right? So we're trying to think about what are the potential good things that might come out of this down the line, because obviously there's quite a few bad things, including children's education suffering and an awful lot of people dying that haven't been getting proper treatment as a consequence of COVID being prioritized. But what are the good things? Any sort of thoughts there? I'm going to start with one which occurred to me straight away when this began, which is that rent and business rates might actually fall, because one of the things that stops the high street from properly competing with the internet is just criminal levels of business rates. I mean, criminal levels. And so these shops on the high street find it very hard to compete. But, well, the high street is going to be damaged. But an element that could work in the long-term favour is that business rates could be reduced. That's maybe just fantasy. I don't know if that's right or wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong. But that might be something that might be a good thing. Another thing is rents, like rents in London, okay, which are just, again, at criminal levels, at levels that you simply can't have a life with, certainly if you're a young person. So those city centre rents may come down, which would not be a good thing if you're a landlord, but would be a good thing if you're trying to have a flat in the first place. So there's a couple of things that might perhaps be good in the long run. I'm grasping, obviously, at straws, but I'm trying to look on the positive. Jones says not much positive. Maybe family time. That is a point, but the downside to that is domestic violence. Yeah, I know. So much for that. But family time is a thing. If without that element, of course, generally, it maybe is a good thing that children and parents are seeing more of themselves. But you see, that is good up to a point. I mean, if you've got a big house and you've got 5 children, then that's fine, because the children can go and play in the East Wing or whatever, and you don't have to see them until tea time. But if you actually live in like what everybody lives in, which is like a small flat, and you've got 5 children or whatever, then it's going, this, it's going. That's good that you're seeing them all the time, and there could definitely be value from that, and so that is something. That is something, but of course that also has its downsides, as well as the fact that they're staying off school. But then somebody said to me, well, why do you want to send them to school if they're just going to get propagandized with Black Lives Matter and all sorts of modern weirdness? And that's also a point. So for those who are able, homeschooling might take off. But then again, homeschooling is something that only a few people can do, and not everybody wants to, even if you're able to. But for some people that might be an advantage. Mags, a small sense of community, looking out for neighbours, supporting those who needed it. I lived where no one actually talked to each other. That's also true, isn't it? Community can be revived. A sense of, as you say, looking out for each other. That's something that's been very bad, as Joan says, is separation from grandparents and from the other elements of the family. That's also true. Catherine says cleaner air and cleaner rivers. That's a consequence of less travel, I suppose. Charlie says the only good thing is there's been no independence marches. Yeah, yeah, that has been a good thing, and that no doubt will start up again. Ibrox Park says in Northern Ireland, the ordinary pubs have been open for only 4 weeks since last March, and the high streets are decimated. Absolutely, the high streets are suffering here in Glasgow. Very much so. Yeah. But then Joan also points out that community can be split if neighbours report each other. Yeah, that is true. I mean, that's I find that disturbing that neighbours would grass up other neighbours. Maybe they don't like each other, of course, but normally you shouldn't be grassing up your neighbour. Really, that's not British. That's not British. That's very much an un-British thing. Is grassing up your neighbour. That's a sort of East Germany thing that we imagine happened under, for example, the Stasi or something like that. So yeah, the grassing up thing is really annoying, as is the apparent police heavy-handedness and patrolling people having a cup of coffee on a park bench, that sort of thing. That's not a good sign either. The police should not have allowed themselves to get into that sort of situation at all. Mm. Hmm. Other good things perhaps is well, I don't know if working from home is a good thing, really. For some people, I think it can be good, but again, it's not everybody's in the perfect situation. If you've got a big house with a big garden and you can build a wee office for yourself out in the back garden or something, everything's hunky dory. You're loving that. I can understand that. But for many of us, it's not possible to work from home. Well, a lot of jobs, of course, you can't work from home. But for those of us who can work from home, not all of us even want to work from home. So, again, working from home is something that only benefits some people, and good for them if it benefits them. That's great. But it's not an all round solution. Um, any other points? Yeah, somebody suggested in the papers that it might revitalise villages, because if people are working from home, they're going to need more resources in the village itself. So maybe that will revitalise rural areas as people spend more time in rural areas rather than commuting into town. Perhaps that might work through the system in some way. Um, Well, Joan says what a lot of us think. Lockdowns are a disaster, and we do take the point of view here at A Force for Good that that lockdown is not a legitimate form of government in a democracy. It's not a proportionate response. And we have to ensure that when this is over and done with, that we have a political culture that says this is never going to happen again. This is not going to be our response in future. Because something that unless we get that point from the government, then who's going to open a small business? Who's going to open a cafe in the centre of town? Who's going to open a bistro? Who's going to open a wee shop? If you know that there's a good danger that within the next 2 or 3 years, when the next virus hits, you're just going to get shut down and put out of business. Nobody's going to do that. So we have to hope that, and we have to work to ensure that our politicians never do this again to us, that we find other ways of dealing with this. Because otherwise the economy will never get back on its feet again. Hank says car insurance should come down. Is that because there'll be less cars on the road? I guess so. And McGregor says you shouldn't lock down healthy people. That's correct. You used to. The idea of quarantine is that you quarantined the sick. You kept the sick away from the healthy, not the healthy away from each other. It's an interesting comment from John. He says it made him realise he doesn't want an office job anymore and will begin retraining once things open up again. Yes, I think quite a few people will be reevaluating things at this stage. Ibrox Park wonders if COVID has pitched people against people the world over. Is that what it was designed to do? Certainly these political matters often cause people to polarize in some way against each other. Deterioration of eyesight as a consequence of working from home on video screens. Yeah, one has to be careful if you're watching a video screen all the time. It does affect your eyes, no question about it. So you have to have a lot of rest, and you have to do what you can, like with screen dimmer screens and on bigger letters and stuff like that, because it is a danger if you just spend your whole life looking at a screen. And you shouldn't want to do that either. And somebody made a very good point to me last week about Zoom meetings. Yeah, Zoom meetings are very convenient, but it's not a natural way to live, and it's not a natural way to teach little children at school either. At school, little children should be socializing with each other. They shouldn't be interacting with each other through a video screen. And certainly not at the age when their little brains are just developing. Okay, so too much zooming for little children, and indeed for adults, but especially when your brain is growing, it's not good, because it's acclimatizing you to a strange way of looking at the world and relating with your fellow human beings. Now, folks, if you've enjoyed today's show, remember we are a force for good at our website, forceforgood.uk. And we was talking earlier about the importance of talking about Britishness. We do have our Scottish and British merchandise, which is available at our Teespring store. And we've also got a range of pro-British products there. English and British, Welsh and British, British Ulster. All of these slogans are emblazoned very attractively on hoodies and t-shirts, as is other slogans like British and Proud. And we've also got our classic Union Heart t-shirts as well. Red t-shirts with a Force for Good Union Heart through the middle of them. So do check out our Teespring store for any patriotic merchandise that you want in order to wear it on your chest. And please do consider helping us if you can through a wee merchandise stuff there, if you like it. Good stuff, folks. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. This has been Good Morning UK Have Your Say, which is our Wednesday mid-morning show that runs from 10:30 to 11:30 every Wednesday. We'll be back next Wednesday. In the meantime, do check us out. We are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We've now got a Rumble account, rumble.com, where we're uploading these videos, and we Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, Rumble. We had a Parler account, hoping Parler will come back on after the system attacked it. We had 7,000 followers on Parler. It's going to be coming back on. Just when it comes back on, we don't know yet. So do check us out. Our handle is UK A Force for Good at all of these social media platforms. Please share, please like, and help us to grow and to get the positive message of the union out, because that's what we're committing to doing into the future for the next, as long as it takes, basically. So, folks, it just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom, and God save the Queen.